Da-na-na, da-na-na. The Grunge Bible Podcast is back. Episode 148. That was an allude to Sports Center back in the day.
Oh,
Remember
yeah.
They used to start all their segments with stuff like that.
Da-na-na, na-na-na. And then they'd have like
Top
the really
10 would come in.
like the really like peppy, like not elevatory music, but similar to that. Man, the anchors they had back then were unbelievable.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, that was TV personalities. And then they would hit you with today on the Grunge Bible Podcast, we will be talking about Jar of Flies, 30th anniversary, why Chris is hungover, and what songs will you be listening to this week? And of course, This Day in Music coming up on this episode.
Don't touch that dial. Sports Center coming up next.
We'll be right back.
Oh, yeah.
Before
now we're here. Commercial free on the Grunge Bible Podcast.
Yeah. Exactly. You only have a few commercials built in.
Exactly.
But yeah, Chris, kind of alluded to it again, but how are you doing, man?
Dude, I'm grateful. It took a lot for me to get here for episode 148 of the Grunge Bible Podcast. I am nursing.
You traveled a long distance.
Yeah, I am nursing potentially one of the worst hangovers that I've ever had at this present time. My condition has improved greatly this morning into this afternoon. We're recording this the episode comes out in like 16 hours, like Sunday afternoon.
This is a live look of how we're feeling for Monday morning. This is a live look.
So I feel so much better than I did this morning. We were supposed to record this like 2 hours ago, and I'm grateful that we didn't because I don't think I would have been able to.
This is Kenny Rogers. I just dropped in to see what condition your condition was
yeah,
in.
exactly. Yeah, this is the check-in here. I'm doing okay. This too shall pass. I really, this podcast a little bit is being a punisher of the moment in some ways, but sometimes you have to do the things that you have to do. And after this, I'm home free. I think I'm gonna go get some Grease food after this and just veg out and watch some professional football playoff action. So that's what I'm gonna do. How are you today, Ethan? I think you're in a lot better of a condition than my condition is in now that I'm dropping in on your condition.
Absolutely. We made the decision to push the podcast recording from Saturday to Sunday. And our goal was we wanted to be productive on Sunday. So this is a good thing to just knock out. And I don't think we regret it because, yesterday I had a really good day yesterday.
Yeah.
Got out there, walked in the cold.
Oh yeah, I did that too.
Got a workout in. And, it was just a really nice Saturday. I'm doing really well. January's been really good to me. So I'm thankful. Do you have a mental list of your top 10 hangovers, would you say? Like you say this is in your top 10, do you have other, it's hard to really remember unless it was a significant type of moment. Like I remember a lot of the hangovers where I had to drive the next day.
Yes.
Those are the easiest ones to remember because
I've got a few
sure
that I remember
random.
For sure. This one was pretty bad. You were there my 18th birthday in Pittsburgh with the bottle incident. That was a pretty bad one. And then there was one time where I had to drive from Cleveland, Ohio to Ames, Iowa, which is like a 12 or 13 hour drive. And I was in so much peril, and to this day, I don't know how I would not be able to do it today if I had to. So those are three that come to mind. But the worst one is always the next one.
It's true. Yeah. The current one.
Yeah. Yeah. And as soon as you're done with it, you're like, oh, that wasn't that bad. Like even right now, I'm like, oh, it wasn't that bad.
2 days will pass and you'll be like, all right, I'm good.
Oh yeah. I mean, my body is
2 days
temple.
are going to move like cement.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had one of those a couple weeks ago for Curtis's wedding, and it was like one of the worst headaches I think I've ever had.
Yeah. I think the thing with me though,
splitting headache.
Yeah. And you could probably offer some more insight into this than me. But I don't even feel that like I don't think it's that I drink like very aggressively. I just think now the older I get, like the worse they are. Although another one 100%. That comes to mind undoubtedly is the Charleston wedding. That was a hangover.
That was a different type of hangover. I was I was delirious. Like there's hangovers where you're like, physically hurting.
Yeah.
Right. Headaches are the worst. Like that one, I was like in limbo.
I felt like I wasn't completely established within the space-time continuum.
Like it was an exhaustion hangover. Like I was like, there was a few times where I woke up in the morning and I was like, I was trying to drive to Charleston and I was like, I had to park my car and call you and walk around and be like, I can't physically operate a vehicle in this headspace. I'm not paying, I'm not going to be paying attention if I do. And I had to sit it out, you know?
Yeah. And I'll tell you, Ethan, to this day, having to leave you to go get my flight is probably one of the things that I feel the worst about that I've ever done in my life.
It was like one of those scenes. It's like, what's it, Jake Gyllenhaal or whatever, where he's like leaving the party. He's like,
yeah,
that was you in the morning. You were just like leaving, like,
yeah,
I'll see you later,
we
man.
woke up just absolutely hurting. And I remember you said to me, you're like, it really doesn't feel right that you have to leave already. There's so much to unpack.
There was so much to unpack. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
That was the day that in a half hour I'll be fine.
Yeah. That was one. Yeah. All I wanted to do was talk to somebody. I had no one to talk to. No one would understand except for you. I mean, we did talk, obviously.
Yeah, as we do. And we're continuing to talk. So it sounds like you're doing okay today.
Yeah, I'm doing great.
That's great.
Big game tonight.
Big game. The Chiefs play the Bills tonight, which is exciting for you as a Chiefs fan. And this episode is hopefully exciting for the music fans out there because we are going to be celebrating and commemorating the 30th anniversary of Jar of Flies, the 1994 Alice in Chains EP, which came out on January 25th, 1994. So this is the birth week, the anniversary week, etc. So we are going to spend some time to chat about that. We did do a proper Jar of Flies episode, I believe back in January of 2022, episode 24, or 44, excuse me, that was more of our traditional kind of song by song and background on the album, background on the EP, the EP's recording and whatnot. So this will kind of be a little bit of a different spin, but if you want some Jar of Flies here on the 30th birth week, go back and check that episode out.
That was also the same time in my life where I had just got hacked on Instagram.
Yep.
So we had a nice little rant in the beginning talking about how you need to be double authenticated in your life. So
Two-factor authentication, baby.
Yeah, so definitely not as clean as our podcasts are today, but still worth a listen.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get into Alice in Chains' Jar of Flies, and before we get into this day in music history, I would like to take this time and thank the people that support this show and that make it possible. We are coming up on the 3rd anniversary of our beginning of this podcast. We've almost got 156 episodes under our belt, 3 years in a row, every single week. And we are able to do that because of the support, the financial contributions of people, most notably on Patreon, especially our top tier supporters who give us $10 a month to basically allow us to pay to do this podcast. So it's not coming out of our pockets, and we're very grateful for that. So the top tier are Alex Long, Alexis Shannon, Black Hole Sean, The Blue Owl, Kara K, Eddie Vedder got me through my second divorce, Down in the Hole, Flat Out Fucked, Doug Endy, D-Boat, Epona, Eric R. Berry, Faith Bittner, Fuck Soup, Gochu John, Granny Grunge, Jade Mercado, Jamie Lynn, Carlene Salona, Nikki Six, Millie, Laura Nyreen, Chris LSMS, Keith White, Pile of Punk, Rachel Corning, Seattle 4 Fanboy from New Jersey, Sherry Matthews, Mike McCready's Mustache, What the Fuck is Up Denny's, and King Buzzo Stole My Hair. Thank you very, very much. And that puts a lid on another notebook for me for the Grunge Bible podcast. I'm on my 3rd notebook for the show, so I got to rewrite the list.
That's all right. You can work on your penmanship.
Exactly. I've been working on my penmanship a lot lately, trying to, get it recalibrated again.
It's good. It's a dying art.
Exactly. Like, fuck around and start writing in cursive again.
So before we dive into the EP, Jar of Flies, we're going to revisit This Day in Music. We took a 2-week break because we had some awesome guests on. I encourage you to go back and listen to our last 2 episodes with Patrick Warburton and then one with Scott Crane and Patrick. Extremely, extremely insightful to Seattle sound in the 80s and the 90s and what became grunge. So check that out. Starting, we have a few birthdays we're going to go through. It wasn't a crazy day in music history,
No,
January 20th.
nothing too crazy on January 22nd.
some random ones. First, we'll start with, I'm going to skip the first birthday, actually. I'm going to 1960. Michael Hutchence from INXS was born. And our friend Chris Cafaro loves Michael and does a lot of great photos, has a lot of photos from him over the years. And people love him. Tom, my coach, he's a huge INXS fan and tried to get me to listen a few times. And I did. It is good. It's like kind of 80s and
I've never
metal,
really listened. And he passed away in 1997. He was only 37 years old.
Yeah, he left us early.
Yeah, absolutely. I always hear people speak very highly of INXS and Michael, so might have to check that out, get around to it.
Definitely worth a listen. I mean, I don't know if it's gonna be your favorite. It's kind of like, but it is really good for time and place. I think when people were listening to it.
Totally.
Now you're gonna compare it to a lot of other stuff. So
right. Moving forward, on this day in 1965, Steven Adler of Guns N' Roses fame, I believe he was the drummer, he was born. So happy birthday to Steven Adler, our favorite band.
Exactly. Our favorite band, Guns N' Roses, happy birthday. That's all we're going to say about that. 1965, also, DJ Jazzy Jeff. I don't know much about him. I don't know
who this is.
Yeah, I kind of thought that. I think I mistaken him for another DJ. So either way, happy birthday, DJ Jazzy Jeff. We're going to keep it short with that one.
Absolutely. And also born on this day, this time in 1990, Logic, the rapper, I believe.
Yeah. Are you a Logic fan by chance?
No, not really. I just I have awareness of who Logic is, and I think maybe a couple of the more popular songs.
He had that one, the Suicide Hotline.
The Hotline one, yeah.
The 1-800-273.
Yeah.
8255.
Yeah, that's the one that I know him from, but I don't really know any of his other work.
Yeah, that song that came out in 2017. Yeah. I remember when it came out, and Logic had a nice little bump during that year. Mm-hmm. It was pretty big. So
turning 34 today.
Felt worth putting on there.
Yeah. Let's get into some events now. Ethan, we should start furthest and go in chronological order forward, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll get us started. So on this day in 1959, Buddy Holly made his final recordings, including Peggy Sue Got Married, Crying, Waiting, Hoping, That's What They Say, What to Do, Learning the Game, and That Makes It Tough. He obviously passed away in the tragic Day the Music Died plane accident just outside of Clear Lake, Iowa, where I have been. There is a venue there called the Surf Ballroom, which is where Buddy Holly and company played their final show before getting on the plane that fateful evening. And they have a commemorative area to them, and it's actually cool. Like in the lobby, they have like the original phone booth, because a lot of places obviously had phone booths back in the day, and they preserved it as it was that day, because that's the last he made his last phone call there, I think, to his wife or something. So it's behind glass, and it's like this old phone booth, and it's got like a note that like he had written like backstage or something on there too. So really kind of eerie, but definitely a notable figure in the music world, and once again cool. Somebody that was gone too soon.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. Very inspirational for a lot of people. Always think about the Weezer song, of course. 1967, the Monkees performed live for the first time at the Cow Palace in San Francisco to a sellout crowd. First show, pretty awesome.
That's electric.
The Monkees were one of the biggest bands in the 60s, if I know the lore correctly. And they're, pretty, I guess, like pretty, pop rock, I'd say. And I don't have, I just hear them reference a ton. Another band that is just legendary, but I don't have much to say about them. Not a lot of history in my mind about them, but a lot of people love them.
A lot of people do love them, and I'll tell you, there's San Francisco music scene in the late '60s is probably one of the more vibrant and interesting music scenes that have ever existed, I would say. So obviously the Monkees getting their start there in 1967. Moving forward to 1983, a 24-hour music video network called MTV, which you may have heard of, began broadcasting to the West Coast of the United States on this day in '83 after being picked up by Group W Cable Los Angeles. MTV had originally begun August 1st, 1981, but it was not until 1983 that they made the move to the West Coast and, nationwide accessibility.
Yeah, pretty awesome. MTV is now, I don't want to say obsolete, but it kind of lost a lot of its power. About
linear television that isn't event based is just people just I don't watch it. Like I only watch live events.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to jump in night to night and really be anticipating stuff like that anymore. Sadly,
yeah.
But man, it really changed the face of music, obviously, in the way that it brought bands out. So
worth noting. Grunge especially.
Yep,
played a big part.
All right, last one, 2012. Adele broke an American chart record that has stood for years after being set by the Beatles and Pink Floyd. Singer's second album, 21, clocked up 16 weeks at number 1 on the U.S. chart, matching the success of the Titanic original soundtrack. 21 released in January and beaten the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper's, and Pink Floyd's The Wall, which had a streak of 15 weeks at number 1. Pretty cool. I thought that was important because you had the Beatles and Pink Floyd that were holding at the top of the charts, and then Adele broke it. So I think that's a pretty big shift.
Yeah,
absolutely. Shows a big shift in popular music.
Yeah.
And staying power of said music and what, because the Beatles and Pink Floyd are just legendary bands. Everybody knows them. And I think Adele definitely had a stranglehold on the music in the early 2010s.
Unbelievably talented.
Yeah, I mean, really, really special.
And that's like 16 weeks. That is such a long time.
Yeah.
That's like think of like that is a very statistically significant chunk of a year. And like you're the biggest game in town for that long. Like you're one thing. That's really interesting. And then I think there was maybe a month or two ago, we had a Beyonce one where I think like every song on her album Lemonade charted at the same time. Like that's like, I struggle to comprehend like how massive one person can be, and one body of creative work can be, that like everything is that popular at the same time.
Yeah.
It's impressive.
It's very impressive. So that was This Day in Music across the years.
And now it's time for the Jar of Flies zone.
Jar of Flies. So, like you said, we do have an episode where we talk about this a good bit. Jar of Flies, 7 songs, half an hour long, just over 30 minutes. And every one of these songs is special. Yeah. I know I can say that with confidence. I'm sure you can as well.
Absolutely.
This EP has a lot of really great, instrumental work, acoustic vocals. I know when they were in the studio, they did not want to sound electric at all. They wanted to be very analog. They wanted the acoustic guitar to sound as true to an acoustic guitar as you can make it. And they wanted to, it happened quick. I think it was like they had a 10-day, reservation for the studio, and they had long days, and they kind of banged this out, and it was too good not to release. So they decided that they were going to release it. And it's a good thing they did, because it did really well. I believe it was a quadruple platinum in 2022. That means, is that 4 million?
I think, platinum's a million. So yeah.
4 million,
yep.
Which is unreal. And I think it's out of the gates. It was like one of the best weeks. It was like 140,000 in the first week or something, 144,000.
Yeah.
I think I read.
It's a large, 141,000 copies in the first week.
Yeah. So altogether, this album is, something that I don't want to say they didn't foresee coming. It was kind of like they wanted to get back, recalibrate, And they kind of walked out of there with a masterpiece that we
Yeah.
all kind of go back to very often for
Absolutely.
various different reasons.
Yeah, and I think it was such a incredible step forward from their work on Sap. You know, obviously with Sap being kind of the first iteration of a lot of acoustic driven stuff. You know, and with Jar of Flies, I mean, just I think the instrumentation relative to Sap is just taken up, you know, several more notches. And to me, like, you know, yesterday you and I both did the same thing. Like we went out, we walked around, like, you know, we went for a nice walk in the wintertime and we listened to Jar of Flies. And, you know, it had been a little while since I had done a front to back listen to this EP. And, you know, you're instantly reminded of what makes it great. And for me, Jar of Flies is really the Sean Kinney and Mike Inez show. I mean, the bass guitar and the drumming, you know, given the fact that it's acoustic, right, and given the fact that there's a lot, you know, it's a softer sound than what you would obviously find on a Dirt. There's just got to be so much more nuance, I think, and delicacy to the way I think particularly the bottom of the band plays, you know, the drummer and the bassist, and like. The attention to detail, the precision that those guys played with, layered so perfectly on top of one another and just gave, you know, so much structure, I think, to these songs, but also so much open space for Jerry and Lane to do what they did. And I love what you mentioned at the beginning where, you know, kind of wanting a more analog sound. Like, you know, I always think like on Nutshell at the beginning, like you can hear like one of the strings ring out, you know, and you know, that's an imperfection, but to me, like that's what makes this album so special is because it's all laid out there. And there are those imperfections there. You know, I think that's what kind of makes it holistic and that's what makes it beautiful. And, you know, walking around yesterday, listening to it, having not done a front to back listen in a long time and running Grunge Bible and posting oftentimes really stupid memes about a lot of these songs, you kind of forget about the weight of these songs and the gravity of these songs and how they affect you. And that's my own fault. But yeah, this one, you know, if you're away from it for a little bit and you kind of let it sink back in, it still hits you hard, you know, even 30 years later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I believe Jerry, he had said that, you know, there was no extra noise on this album and they wanted to have all that extra space where you could hear the instruments and that's what it is. It's really well composed. Everything has its place and it's not too noisy. It's not crowded, what they're used to doing. And they didn't want to turn up their amps, as they said. And this was also Mike Inez's first kind of go with the band. They had just got him. They had just parted ways with Starr. And so this was, they wanted to see what he had to offer, and I think he really obviously showed up in a big way. And and like I said, it really, every song is well put together and well thought out. Yeah, and it's awesome.
And what a kind of, you know, expectation defier this EP was. I mean, like think of a song like I Stay Away. Like they brought in like violin players and like they have like the orchestral element to it. You know, and this is from the same band that it hadn't been really that long since they released like Godsmack and Rooster. And, you know, the fact like, you know, the old meme, like, you know, get yourself somebody who can do both. Like Alice in Chains, not only can they do both, but they can do it all. And even throughout this particular EP, like you get so many different styles. I mean, I love the fact that No Excuses is like kind of in the middle of the EP, right? Because like they hit you hard with Rotten Apple and Nutshell, and then I Stay Away kind of bring things up a little bit. And then like No Excuses is just this kind of like poppy kind of thing. And then they hit you with Whale and Wasp, right?
Oh,
it's like you drop the needle on this thing, like you don't know where they're going to go next. Right, the fact that they've got Whale and Wasp and then Don't Follow, which would make perfect sense to be the final track on the EP, and then they hit you with Swing on this. I mean, it's unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. It's such a it's a great flow, and they offer you a ton of stuff. And then the jazziness of Swing on this is beautiful.
The track sequencing to this is just perfect, and I'm always fascinated by that, and that's something that I'm really interested about, and I would love to have conversations or listen to conversations where, you know, bands kind of talk through, you know, why they ordered, you know, EPs and albums in the way that they did, because this one just kind of makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Whale and Wasp. So we were talking about this right before the show. So as we talked about, you're kind of nursing a hangover.
Yeah.
And, I wanted to, is this one of the best albums, EPs for hangover? Because if you think about them coming off of all of the loud music and loud everything, I mean, they were kind of nursing a hangover of loud, heavy music and wanted to create.
Well, they had a lot of
like
shit going on too. I mean,
did.
obviously, Starr leaving the band and the addiction that was running rampant, I think, through Lane's life at the time, and Jerry also, going through some stuff, and I'm sure even just in their own lives. I mean, this was a very delicate moment, I think, for the band.
Yeah, and the bands had stated that Jar of Flies is about living with the consequences, full of deeply felt reflections on loneliness, self-imposed isolation, and human connections. Sounds like a hangover.
That sounds like a hangover. Yeah, living with the consequences.
Living with the consequences. Exactly. It's pay to play,
Yeah.
Time in, time out. And you had asked me, like, I don't know if I'm the whale or the wasp. And I responded and said, after you listen, I think you'll know.
So artfully,
Chris,
as only you do, Ethan, you so quickly replied and so beautifully, you will know once you listen.
So Chris, after you've listened, and I hope you did, I hope you put it on as you were taking your power nap right before this.
I did.
Are you the whale or the wasp? And how did that song, because I listened to it as well and was like, I was blown away again.
Yeah.
I love this song.
So Chris, at the beginning of today, I was undoubtedly the whale.
Yeah.
But in the last hour or so, since we've prepared to do this show, I think I've transitioned to being the wasp. It's kind of a rebirth of sorts for me. But this morning, when I listened to it at first, I was like, definitely the whale.
Yeah. So if you're out there wondering what we mean when we're talking about this, you need to listen to the track and decide for yourself if you're the whale or the wasp. And it ebbs and flows. Sometimes you're the whale, sometimes you're the wasp. But great song. I really do love that guitar slide and like.
Oh yeah,
it's so
and like
eerie
so much emotion is being elicited without lyrics, right?
Yes, exactly.
And that's always really, really impressive to be able to do. And especially like, you think about it like on an EP, like, I mean, there's really not that much breathing room, in terms of just physical space that you have on this thing. And the fact that they would take a track and make it purely instrumental, I think is really kind of ballsy a little bit. And just really special. And it just kind of goes to show you like the band was comfortable enough with who they were and confident enough in their direction and their inspiration for this project that they were able, and they didn't have any misgivings about putting something like this out. I think that's really honorable and really cool. But for me, this album is what it is, I think, because of Lane. And particularly, I think, because of the lyrics and the songwriting and, it's got to be Nutshell, right? I mean, the one that we think of all the time. And Mike Inez had spoken about Nutshell when a reporter had asked him, what song made Mike think of Lane Staley the most. And he went on and said, I think the number one for me is Nutshell. Lane was very honest with his songwriting, and in Nutshell, he really puts everything in a nutshell for everybody. That song still gets me choked up whenever I play it. I get a little teary-eyed, and sometimes when we're doing the arena runs especially, they'll have some video footage of Lane. I look and see me and Jerry and Sean looking the wrong way. We're not looking at the audience. We're looking back at Lane, and it's pretty cool that there's still that song for us. It's just a sad thing. And that's something I forget about a lot of times too with this music and I think the band, and you go and see the band live. Like, I mean, this, like, Lane was a real person, he was a friend of theirs. Mike Starr was a friend of theirs and a coworker and a brother. And, more so than the people that wrote and played on your favorite songs, they were people in your lives and people who had birthdays and had good days and bad days and, told funny jokes and cried and, loved. And I kind of forget, sometimes you can forget about the human element about it, but then when you hear about, you listen to Mike or Jerry talk about these guys, and it kind of puts things into perspective, especially through a song like Nutshell.
Yeah, this time of year, especially January, February, December, I mean, Nutshell gets a lot of posts, right? We post about it a lot, and it can be a meme format, and people talk about, how you cry when you listen to it. And so it's, a little bit of a joke. But then you look back and you see this quote and you hear the band talk about it, and they're like, no, this one really is that song for us. and for
Yeah.
how we think about Lane and how it gets. I can only imagine seeing a show and having footage of Lane across the top. Oh my gosh, like the Vince McMahon like cut it. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
I cry and like.
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly. That is so deep, and I mean that song will always be that for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I've talked to some other artists, and there's always a song that they wrote for somebody that passed, and it's going to hold that meaning for a long time. And obviously they wrote it all together, so it's a little different. But yeah, I mean, nutshell is that song.
Yeah,
I mean, it is. It always will be.
Yeah,
and
I
it
think
holds the belt.
It totally does. And I think Nutshell in the EP as a whole, and even like the jokes that surround it of like, you know, putting on Alice in Chains' Jar of Flies and having a good old cry, like in a weird way, I think it's kind of a positive thing because at least it's getting people talking about and acknowledging the fact that like, you know, you can have emotions. And I think especially for like men, you know, to be able to acknowledge, you know, that there's emotions and it's okay to be sad and feel sadness and show sadness and, you know, live with those feelings for a little bit and you know, fucking it's okay to cry. Like, you know, if these guys are doing it, you know, with this song and I think it's an important lesson, I think, in there somewhere that you can take away from it. But yeah, this one, you know, 30 years later, I can't, that's half of these guys' lives at this point. You know, they wrote this half a lifetime ago. And that's really interesting. It's kind of wild. Like I had this conversation with my mom the other day, like relative to like how time passes. Like, Mom, like, does it feel like you've been a parent for half of your life? And she's like, I've never really even thought of it that way. But like, it's, you know, my brother's about to turn 30. My mom's just past 60. So it's almost half of her life that she's been a parent. Like, it's half a lifetime ago that these guys, you know, put this thing together. And that's a significant amount of time. And we don't know quite yet because it's still, you know, it's not the 25th, but Alice in Chains on their socials, they teased presumably some sort of commemorative reissue of Jar of Flies that will be released on the 30th anniversary on January 25th. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. I might have to pick that up.
Yeah, I think so too. I was listening to it. I found out I knew my record player had this, but has a Bluetooth option. So I was listening through my record player, but it wasn't spinning. Yeah. But it was really nice. And I thought the same thing. I was like, this is one I need to get. Yeah. And I know we mentioned it last time, but there was, for a limited time, a double EP where they had Sap and Jar of Flies on the same vinyl. And now that's special. That would be, I mean, that's like coveted. It's very coveted. So maybe I'll have to check eBay and pick up, that's going to be like $1,000.
It's not cheap. A lot of the original pressings of Jar of Flies, I think because there were not very many of them, are very expensive. And it's something that a lot of people covet. And certainly as the years go on, they covet it more. So, yeah, Ethan, do we have any more, any additional thoughts about Jar of Flies?
Yeah, I have one more, and then I have two more thoughts. One more specifically to the music, and I just want to bring up "Don't Follow" again because it is a masterpiece, right? And the second half of it, this harmonica comes in that is just unbelievable. David Atkinson plays the harmonica for it, and
I'm glad we mentioned David's name.
Yeah, and the guy, a couple other guys do the backing vocals and. It has this like two-sided story because it comes in just Lane and very, you know, it could be it's very broken down, and then it picks up and it's just such a jam. And like I said, the harmonica just is beautiful, and then Lane's vocals come in. Mm-hmm. That track is so good and definitely worth a listen. Like, Don't Follow, Whale and Wasp, and then pick one other one if you got to listen to 3 songs from them.
Yeah, that's a really good point about Don't Follow because that last part of the song is a real treat because it really could feel like the song could be over. Yes. And then they hit that, the guitar kind of kicks in. I don't know what type of chord, but it sounds massively different from anything that they had been playing before. And then the harmonica comes in, and I mean, the Lane's vocal run at the end is just unbelievable too.
Yeah,
he's got so much soul in it too. The "Take Me Home" part. And it's just such great songwriting. The melody is unbelievable. Like "Forgot My Woman, Lost My Friends," so on and so forth. It's like that'll get stuck in your head.
Sleep and sweat, the mirror's cold. See my face, it's growing old.
Scared to death, no reason why. Do whatever to get me by.
Oh man,
God damn, that's a good song.
It is, dude. It is really, really good.
That one's special. Fuck, this whole thing is special.
It is totally
Yeah.
worth a 30-minute listen no matter what.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then so that is pretty much it. The last thing that I did want to say, because you're talking about how, you know, it can be good to cry sometimes, and I always think about Jim Valvano and his speech, and he said, quote, "To me, there are 3 things everyone should do every day. Number 1 is laugh. Number 2 is think, spend more time in your thought. And number 3, you should have your emotions move you to tears. If you laugh, think, and cry, that's a heck of a day."
Yeah.
And I live by that. Oh man, it's so good. Laughing. I've just heard like changing the expression on your face does a lot for a human being and their psyche. Like being like smiling, you know, crying, you know, tears. I mean, that type of like muscle movement in your face is really good for your brain. And yeah, those are 3. It's a great piece of advice.
I'm so happy that you brought that up. That's also one of my favorites. And I think like the older I get, the more important I realize it is to be well-rounded and in all things. And I think emotionally too, like, and I've become really fascinated with the idea that like, you know, you have to kind of spend time getting to know and understand like all of the emotions that you're capable of. And, you know, not to push away those things and to kind of live in them for a little bit when they come. 'Cause then I think that's how you learn about yourself. And certainly, you know, we're here to have the full human experience and you know, everything is a part of it. You know, we commit to it all every day, I think, when we get up. So, that speech, obviously, you know, one of the greatest, and he was one of the more moving figures, you know, to face a disease like that and, you know, to choose to inspire people. I love that. That's a full day.
Yeah, it is a full day. Really, really great speech. So with that being said, that is our Jar of Flies 30th anniversary recap to talk about. So
Hell yeah.
hope it was good. Last thing we have to do is going to be talk about the songs of the week, some things that we think you should listen to. And I'm going to keep it simple and say don't follow, because that's what we're talking to. That's what we're listening to. And you really should go listen to that song.
That's fantastic. I am going to choose Whale and Wasp.
Perfect.
So that's pretty much all that needs to be said.
Yep. You tell us if you're the whale or the wasp.
Yeah, that's your homework this week.
Thank you, everybody, for listening, for sticking to the end. Please consider supporting via Patreon. If not, keep listening, keep sharing, and we will talk to you guys next week.
Right on. Thanks for your time, everyone. Take care, rock and roll. And at the end of the day, what are you going to do?
Stay heavy.
Stay heavy.
Stay heavy, guys. All right.
All right.
Peace.
See ya.